I'm Ms. Matsuoka, and I'm going to teach you how to graph basically sine of x, really. But it's, you're adding a bunch of stuff in there, so I'm going to try to break it down for you as much as I can. So first off, it's really important to know all of the variables and what do all the variables do here. So A stands for the amplitude. Oops, sorry. A stands for the amplitude. So basically it's just the height, okay? So it's the amplitude or height. So when you have your regular sine graph, you're figuring out how far is it going up, how far is it going down. That would be the amplitude. Okay, next thing that you see B. Now B is really what changes our important x points, okay? And we talked about before how this kind of determines the cycle. So I'm going to say determines the length of the cycle. Okay, so when we're talking about the length of the cycle, we can find that by doing 2 pi, which is the original length of the cycle, divided by b, which is just whatever's multiplying the x there. So that's what the length of the cycle is equal to. Now, you need to kind of divide that up into 4 bits because, that's how everything is divided up. So the reason it's divided up into 4 is because think about the motion of sine. First you go up, then you go down, then you go down, and then you go up. So we have 4 different directions we go, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's why we're going to divide it up into 4 parts. So when we're determining our important points, that's why we're dividing this cycle by 4, okay? So I'm going to say divide cycle by 4 to get the important points. Okay, so that's B. H is moving it left or right. It's called a phase shift. Okay, and it just moves left if positive, right if negative, okay? And then K just moves it up or down. All of these are really important to take into account, and it's really important to try and piece these things together a little bit before you start even graphing the axes, because if your amplitude is really high and let's say you're moving up a lot, then you want to make sure you leave yourself enough room there. So yeah, it's really important to think about all these things before you really actually graph it, okay? So we're going to go ahead and graph one of them. So let me erase all of this stuff here. And yeah, we'll just dive right in and graph one of them. Alright, so the one we're going to be graphing is y equals, we're going to have 3 sine of, it's going to be 2 times x minus pi over 4 plus 4. So this is our first one here. First thing that we really want to do is I'm going to kind of determine what is the height going to be. So the maximum height, maybe the minimum height also. So I know because of what K does, I'm starting up at 4. Okay, I'm starting up at 4. My amplitude is 3, so that means I'm going up 3 and down 3. So the highest I'm going to be is at +7. The lowest is going to be at +1. So I need to just make sure I have enough room to go up 7 places. Now I also want to think about, do I need like a left side up to my graph, okay? And I can see right here that I don't need a left side to my graph because, you know, this is minus, so it's going to move to the right. So I'm just going to graph it like this. Okay. Okay. And again, this is kind of a bad start, right? It's a bad start because I didn't really leave myself enough room to go up. So again, we have to think about each of these things before we actually graph it. So yeah, we're going 7 up. There's no negatives in either direction. So I'm just going to graph it like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's where 7 is. And this, so I'm going to label that as 7. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4. So 4 is where I start, so that's kind of the first thing I'm drawing here. Drawing that dashed line to kind of make sure, like, that's my baseline. So I'm always going to come back to that line. Because remember what the original sine graph looks like, right? The original sine graph looks like this. We're up at 1, we're down at -1. This is pi over 2, and then it's pi, and then it's 3 pi over 2, and then it's 2 pi here. So you always want to have the same basic shape. You go up, down, down, and up. So it's this basic shape right here that we're always coming back to. And so you can see we're hitting that middle line 3 times, and we're going to hit this middle line here 3 different times as well. Now if you really want, you can also put a dashed line at 7 and a dashed line at 1, so you can see like where those things are, but I don't think it's really necessary to do that. So the next thing I need to figure out is like, okay, well I'm going to have some tick marks on the bottom here, but what are those going to be? So to do that, we need to look at our this new cycle, right? To look at the new cycle, remember that's just 2 pi over b, which is 2. So we're doing this 2 pi over 2. This is the length of our cycle, okay? And that gives me, well, these just cancel out, so that just gives me pi. So that's the length of my cycle. Now to get my important points, okay, I have to divide that by 4. So it's going to be pi over 4. So here's what I need to know. This is where I'm starting, right? I'm starting at pi over 4. So I'm starting at pi over 4 over here. And I need to go over pi over 4 each time for all my important points. So this is my first important point right here. Okay, I can go ahead and mark it right here. And then here's my next one, and my next one. I'm going to have 4 in total on the line here. Actually, sorry, I'm going to have 5 in total. So here's what I have right here, okay? Now, for this one, I mean, if you really want, you can just graph all this stuff already and label it later. But yeah, you will have to label it later. And this is how you know you need those 5 different points instead of just the 4. Okay. Now to figure out what each of these points is, you need to use this pi over 4. Well, we're starting at pi over 4 here. You could do it a couple different ways. I could add pi over 4 to this to get my next one. We could also multiply. This is my second point, so I'm going to multiply this by 2. I think a lot of you think it's a lot easier to multiply fractions rather than add them, so we're going to go ahead and multiply them. So here when I multiply, well, this is just going to cancel out to be 1. That's going to cancel out to be 2. So this is pi over 2 here. Next one is pi over 4 times 3. Well, nothing will cancel out there, so that's going to be 3 pi over 4. And then my next one here is going to be pi over 4 times 4. These, of course, will cancel out, which will leave me with just pi. And my last one is going to be pi over 4 times 5. So that's going to be 5 pi over 4. Now, if you don't like the idea of multiplying them, again, you can just add pi over 4 every single time. But a lot of you don't really like to do that just because you're like, oh, I don't really like adding fractions together. So that's kind of why I showed you an alternate way. So that is our first graph here, okay? As you can see, it has all the right elements in there, okay? You can see that it's raised up by 4, that I'm going up and down 3, that I moved over pi over 4 to the right, and that, you know, this 2 changed the cycle, the length of the cycle. So instead of being 2 pi, it's now just pi. So from here to here, that length is just pi. Okay, so I'm going to give you another example. All right, here's our next example. So with our next example, same type of idea. We want to plan everything out before we draw out our axes. So the first thing that I like to look at is like, how high up do we need to go and how far down do we need to go? So it looks like we start at -1 and we're going up and down by 1/2. So the highest value we're going to have is like -1/2, and then the lowest value is like -1.5. So it's all going to be negative. I don't need any positives. And now I have to look at like right and left. So I'm being moved to the left by 6 pi. It seems like a lot. So I know I'm going to need definitely a lot of room on the left side, and I don't really need any room on the top, okay? So this is basically how I'm going to draw it, okay? So I'm going to draw it like this. Okay, so that's what mine will look like. You know what, just in case, let's draw some to the right as well. Okay, so like I said before, we have that -1. With the fraction, I think it's really helpful to put some tick marks so you kind of know where it's supposed to be. So we're going to say like that's -1/2, that's -1, and I'll label the -1 part, and then that's like -1.5. So here's my dashed line at -1. Okay, now 6 pi just seems like a really big number, so what I'm going to do before I like even graph anything out is I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at the new cycle. Okay, I'm going to see like what that is, and maybe that will kind of help make sense of the 6 pi. So the new cycle, or the length of the new cycle, again is the 2 pi over 1/4. Now you might be thinking, well, what do I do here? Okay, you need to flip and multiply. So we flip and multiply, so it's going to be 2 pi times, I need to flip this to make it 4 over 1. So in total I get 8 pi. So my total cycle is 8 pi, which means that this 6 pi makes a little bit more sense here, because our entire cycle is so large. Again, to find those important points, I need to divide that by 4. So that gives me 2 pi. So basically every 2 pi is going to be a new place here. So I'm gonna just go by 2 pi. So this I'm going to say is -2 pi. This is -4 pi. And this is -6 pi where I start. So that's where I'm starting. Again, I'm going every 2 pi. So this is going to be like, I'm going 2, 2, 2. Let's make one more. That's going to be 2 pi. Okay, so once again, I'm starting here at the -6 pi. I'm going up, down, down, and up. So just follow this right here. Oops, didn't quite go far down enough. Down there, like that. Now you might be wondering, wait, how do I know how many tick marks to put up here? Well, remember, we originally have our 5 points. We have this point, that point, that point, that point, and that point. So we have 5 points in total. You need to just make sure you have 5 spaces to put them. So we have this one, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's how you know how many points to really put there. And if you need more, you could always put them. So that is how you graph that sine function. Again, when you have this different number out in front, you do need to divide it, and you need to be careful that you are flipping and multiplying it correctly. I'm going to go ahead and give you your bonus question now. So here is your bonus question. We have y equals 2 sine of 4 times x plus 3 pi over 8 minus 3. So make sure that you are, before you even graph anything, you're figuring out what's the maximum, what's the minimum, both on the x-axis and on the y-axis. That way you don't have to continually erase and redraw. All right, good luck.